You will never need another barbarian build in Diablo 4 if you follow this one. Seriously, it does it all. Tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons? A breeze. Uber Lilith? Of course it does. Buckle up and let's lunge right into it. The double swing barbarian combines a ton of crowd control, damage, and survivability to create a trifecta that one could only dream of finding. Even better yet, this build does not require any of those pesky, hard to find, unique items. There's variants out there that use a few of these, but we'll discuss those later on in the video. Let's take a look at what makes this build tick and why it's a terror to those pesky mobs in Nightmare Dungeons. But first, if you find yourself looking for powerful builds and useful guides in Diablo 4, don't forget to subscribe to the channel as we break down some of the popular builds in Diablo 4 in an easy to understand way. Thank you, and let me know what guide you guys want to see next. Firstly, let's take a look at some terms that will be used in this guide and what they actually mean. Fortify is a form of damage reduction that has two parts, the first being called Fortify. Let's use an example. If you have 4,000 Fortify but your max life is 10,000, you will take full damage until your current health drops below 4,000. At that point, you'll begin to take 10% less damage while your health is below your current amount of Fortify. You become fortified when your Fortify amount is equal to your current health, meaning that the damage that you take from that point on will be reduced by 10%. Berserking is a buff that will appear above your health bar when it's active. While you're berserking, you gain 25% increased damage, as well as 30% increased movement speed. Unstoppable makes you immune to crowd control effects for the duration of the buff. When you're unstoppable, you will have a large golden sigil above your head indicating that you cannot be crowd controlled. You'll also occasionally see enemies with this effect above their head, which also means you cannot stun or CC them. Now that we have some of the basic terminology out of the way, let's take a look at some of the abilities we use in this build and why they're a part of it. First up, we have Lunging Strike, a basic attack that allows us to close the gap between us and those pesky ranged enemies that we all hate. I'm looking at you, Wraiths, Corpse Bows. Lunging Strike also grants us Berserk for 1.5 seconds after we critically strike an enemy using it. Ground Stomp is an AoE crowd control ability that stuns enemies around the player. Deals a small amount of damage, but the main thing is it enables Double Swing to deal increased damage to stunned enemies, as well as give us Fury regeneration on every enemy that we hit while they're stunned. Warcry gives us Fortify and grants us Berserking and increases our damage output. But potentially the biggest thing for those looking to run content with a group, the damage bonus from Warcry will also apply to nearby allies. It's a great ability to empower your build and support your close allies. Rallying Cry is great for granting movement speed and assists with our Fury generation. Much like Warcry, it also applies to nearby allies and increases their primary resource generation. Challenging Shout is a taunt, so be careful using this if you're in an area with too many mobs, or you're pushing high-end content earlier than you should be. Challenging Shout puts you in the spotlight and forces enemies to attack you. During the duration of Challenging Shout, you gain a large amount of damage reduction that will make you surprisingly tanky. Following this skill tree, you'll also gain 20% bonus max life and gain 3 Fury for each time you take damage while under Challenging Shout. Double Swing, which is our bread and butter of the build. This is our resource spender and deals a lot of damage to enemies standing directly in front of you. Using Double Swing, your character will swing both weapons in front of them from side to side. The goal is to hit enemies with both swings to maximize damage output. To do this, ensure that your primary target is standing directly in front of your character. It means that the enemy will take damage from both swings. The real power of the build comes from pairing Double Swing with Ground Stomp and other sources of stun and crowd control. If your target is stunned when they are hit by Double Swing, you'll generate 25 Fury, allowing you to cast Double Swing infinitely as long as the enemy is stunned. Before we get too bogged down in specific mechanics and how to play the build, let's take a look at the skill tree and get a big picture of the build. Put your first point into Lunging Strike, take Enhanced Lunging Strike, and then we'll have to take Combat Lunging Strike. Combat Lunging Strike will enable us to gain Berserk on critical strikes while we're using the ability. Next, we'll pick up Double Swing by putting all 5 points allowed here. We will be looking to find ranks of Double Swing on our gloves as well, which will enable us to have up to 9 ranks. We'll take its upgrade and Violent Double Swing. Ground Stomp is next with its upgrade and Tactical Ground Stomp. Rallying Cry, its upgrade and Tactical Rallying Cry. Next up, we'll pick a few passives. Imposing Presence will help us gain additional max life, and Martial Vigor for additional damage reduction from elites. We pick up Warcry, its upgrade, and Power Warcry to increase our damage bonus while under the effects of Warcry. 3 points of Booming Voice to increase the duration of all of our shout skills. And then we'll put 3 points into Guttural Yell, which makes our shouts cause enemies to deal 12% less damage for 5 seconds. 1 rank of Raid Leader, just to gain access to aggressive resistance for our more damage reduction while berserking. And then we'll put 3 points into that. Put 1 point into Prolific Fury to increase our Fury generation while berserking. 3 ranks into Pit Fighter, which allows us to deal 9% more damage to close enemies. That means we take 6% less damage from distant ones. Put our next 3 points into No Mercy, which increases our critical strike chance against stunned, immobilized, and slowed enemies. 1 rank into Thick Skin to gain 4 base life, as Fortify every time we take damage. Then we put 3 points into Counteroffensive to gain 12% damage while we have over half of our life as Fortify. 3 ranks of Duelist to increase our attack speed while using one-handed weapons by up to 9%. And Wallop is a big source of damage increase to us. It's the main reason we prefer one-handed bludgeoning weapons over Slash. Wallop gives us 15% increased damage while using bludgeoning weapons. We'll look to pick up an Amulet with 3 ranks as well, which will bring us up to 6. 1 rank of Tempered Fury to give us 3 more max Fury, and access to Invigorating Fury, which heals us for 3% of our max life for every 100 Fury we spend. And finally, we'll pick up our key passive, Unbridled Rage, to increase the damage of Double Swing by 135%, but the cost will also be increased by 100%. We'll offset this cost increase by picking up rings with resource generation and an amulet with fury cost reduction. Don't worry too much about the fury cost increase the passive brings, the damage will be well worth it. And while we're at it, we might as well take a look at the Paragon board. You will max out the following glyphs. Exploit. For every 5 dexterity within range of this node, you gain 1% damage to vulnerable enemies, and the additional bonus means we make anything we damage vulnerable for 3 seconds. Territorial. For every 5 dexterity within range of this node, you deal 2% increased damage to close targets. Martial grants a bonus to all nearby rare nodes, and the additional bonus reduces our shout cooldowns by 1.2 seconds every time we use a shout ability. Ambidextrous grants a bonus to all magic nodes in range and increases our damage while wielding one-handed weapons. And Wrath, for every 5 dexterity purchased within range, you deal 1.5% increased critical strike damage. We also gain 3 Fury on all of our critical strikes. I'll also leave a link to this build in the description below, and I'll attach a card in the top right corner if you want to take a closer look at the Paragon board. Now you might be wondering, what does the normal rotation look like for this build? Well, initially we engage by jumping into a large group of enemies using Lunging Strike, which will grant Berserking for 1.5 seconds. Next we'll use Challenging Shout to bring enemies close to us. Our aspect of Audacity will proc once we get a number of enemies close to us. We'll use War Cry and Rallying Cry to gain Fury generation, damage, move speed, fortify, max life, and attack speed. At this point, you begin using Double Swing on the high priority targets first, those being the shielded ones, being suppressors, or just any of the annoying ones. Once the stun from the aspect of Audacity begins to wear off, we look to use Ground Stomp to stun them again, allowing us to continue using Double Swing and gaining Fury for hitting stun targets. It's important to do your best to have these cooldowns up for every big engagement, so keep an eye on those cooldowns. They shouldn't be very long, but picking up a few cooldown reduction pieces in your gear can always be a good bet. Keep an eye out for the following aspects to help with Fury generation. Bold Chieftain's aspect. Whenever you cast a shout skill, its cooldown is reduced by 1 to 1.9 seconds per nearby enemy, up to a maximum of 6 seconds. This aspect means we can have higher uptime on all of our shouts, which is invaluable to our build, and means we can reduce our downtime on those powerful buffs we gain from our shouts. The aspect of Echoing Fury. Your shout skills generate 2 to 4 Fury per second while active. This helps to mitigate some of our Fury generation problems, as every time we use a shout, which should be almost constantly, we gain up to 4 Fury every second. We'll need to look for some offensive aspects to increase our damage output as well. Look out for the following. Aspect of Berserk Ripping. Whenever you deal direct damage while berserking, inflict 20 to 30% of the base damage dealt as additional bleeding damage over 5 seconds. Berserk Ripping is a very good addition to this build as it applies bleed, which pairs well with many of the Paragon nodes. Edge Master's aspect. Skills deal up to 10 to 20% increased damage based on your available primary resource when cast, receiving the maximum benefit while you have full primary resource. Edge Masters empowers our build while we have high amounts of Fury, which should be all the time while enemies are stunned and we have our shouts active, meaning we're always increasing the damage of our double swings. The aspect of Limitless Rage. Each point of Fury you generate while at maximum Fury grants your next core skill 1 to 2% increased damage, up to 15 to 30% damage. Limitless Rage allows us to take advantage of extra Fury generation while we're already at full, by increasing our damage by up to 2% for each point of Fury we have above our max. The Smiting aspect. You have 10 to 20% increased critical strike chance against injured enemies while you are healthy. You gain 20 to 40% increased crowd control duration. Smiting gives us increased critical strike chance against injured enemies and gives us more stun or knockdown duration while we're healthy. We'll also look out for Exploiter's aspect. You have 20% increased crowd control duration, and while enemies are unstoppable, you deal 20 to 40% increased damage to them. This aspect increases our stun duration even more, and it increases the damage we do to enemies that are unstoppable. Aspect of Numbing Wrath. Each point of fury generated while at maximum fury grants 0 to 54 Fortify. The additional source of Fortify is great for helping us reach Fortified for the 10% damage reduction on all damage we take, and paired with our fury generation is a consistent source of Fortify. The following Malignant Hearts work well in this build, so give them a shot and see which combination you like best. Wrathful, the Barber. A solid choice for almost any build in the game, allows us to kill large groups of enemies very quickly even if they wrap around behind us. Critical strikes and all subsequent damage within 2 to 4 seconds is absorbed by your target. Then the absorbed damage erupts into surrounding enemies. Stored damage is increased by up to 15% per second. Caged Heart of the Calculated. After spending 150 to 200 of your primary resource, your next attack stuns enemies hit for 1 second. Caged Heart of Punishing Speed. Your skills have a 22 to 32% chance to knock down enemies for 1.25 seconds, when that skill's attack speed is higher than 20 to 35%. Caged Heart of Focused Rage. After spending 60 to 100 Fury within 2 seconds, your next non-basic skill's critical strike chance is increased by 22 to 32%. Caged Heart of Tempting Fate. You gain 45 to 65% critical strike damage, but your non-critical strikes deal 20 to 25% less damage. Now that we have all those aspects in Malignant Hearts to look for, let's take a look at what we need to put on our gear and where each of these aspects should go. On our helmet, we want crowd control duration, cooldown reduction, max life, and total armor. We'll put Aspect of Might here, which will give us 20% damage reduction for 6 seconds every time we use a basic attack. On our chest, we'll do damage reduction from close enemies, damage reduction while fortified, and total armor. You can also substitute max life in here, and as well as on your pants. We'll put Aspect of Disobedience right here to gain 0.5% increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage, stacking up to 30%. On our legs, we'll do damage reduction from close enemies, damage reduction while fortified, total armor, and damage reduction while injured. We'll put Aspect of Numbing Wrath on those. And then onto our boots, we'll put damage reduction while injured, fury cost reduction, movement speed, fortified generation, and the Exploiter's aspect. Luckily all of our weapons are the same. We'll look for critical strike damage, vulnerable damage, strength, and all stats. Keep in mind the Wallop passive that we picked in our skill tree only works on bludgeoning weapons, so a big deal to find 2 one-handed bludgeoning weapons over slashing. Now, it can work with slashing, you're just going to see a significant damage fall off. For aspects on those, we'll do on our 2-handed bludgeoning weapon, we'll choose Smiting aspect. On our 1-handed weapons, we'll choose Edgemaster's aspect and Aspect of Berserk Ripping. On our 2-handed slash weapon, we'll choose Accelerating aspect. Onto our amulet, we'll do cooldown reduction, 3 ranks of wallop, crowd control duration, and fury cost reduction. And on our rings, we'll do critical strike chance, critical strike damage, vulnerable damage, and resource generation. And then we'll put Aspect of Echoing Fury and Bold Chieftain's aspect on our rings. There is a variant of this build that uses the Magnum Opus unique one-handed sword. You may need to adjust your aspects in Paragon tree a little bit. The guide I have linked in the description as well as the card in the top right corner will show you what your Paragon board should look like. Other than that, it just about does it. I hope this video has helped someone out there find a fun build for Barbarian. Thanks again for watching. If you learned something from this guide and are looking for more Diablo 4 builds, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out, and I will see you guys in the next one.